You know, I've often wondered, and I've got a question for you. Have you ever trained your staff, your team, your colleagues, your friends to what you want as opposed to what your clients want? And I guess I'll expand on that a bit. You know, I was at a very prominent coffee, food, donut chain, and I get to the cash. It was quite a lineup. I get to the cash, and I thought something was off kind of right away. I get to the cash, and there's this young lady at the cash, and I ordered my first beverage, and I ordered my second beverage, and I got kind of this glossy kind of deer caught in the headlight look. And she said, "What again?" And I told her again. And she looks down at the monitor, and she looks back up at me, and she looks down at the monitor, and she looks back up at me, and I can tell she had no idea what to do. And I mean, we're talking prime rush hour, if you will, right? And I kind of stood there for a minute, or maybe not a minute, maybe 30 seconds. And she says, "I'm very sorry, I'm new." I said, "Well, how long have you," she says, "how long have you been working?" She says, "Well, I've only been working 2 days. This is my second shift." And I said, "Oh, okay." And she's looking around, and you can tell she's looking for either the individual that was assigned to kind of like help her out, or for somebody to help. And 4 people passed and did not even engage in eye contact with her, which, I mean, it blew me away. And part of me says, don't be surprised, because you'd be amazed at what you find out when you go into companies to train their sales teams and their staff, and how undertrained a lot of people are. But I looked at it, I thought, wow, like this company is supposed to be very prominent for their training programs and stuff. And don't get me wrong, everybody was busy, but they left the employee, their teammate, hanging. And what in turn happened? Their teammate left a client, me, hanging, right? So what I want really for you to think about this, and I'll get to the end of the story in a minute, but really think about when you're training your team, when you're training your personnel, when you're really putting new strategies, techniques, ideas, mainframes, frameworks, whatever it is, into your company, into your business, is it affecting the customer in the end while you're doing it? So here's kind of what happened in the end of the story. Is gentleman came by, and he says, and she finally called him down, because thing again, he looked like he was really busy, so she had that "I don't want to disturb him" kind of look. Nonetheless, she finally called him in, and he says, "Okay." And this was how she said, "Where do I find a London Fog?" That was the drink I was trying to order, which is like an Earl Grey tea with steamed milk. And he goes, "Oh, come on, that's so easy." That was exactly right. "Come on, that's so easy." He goes, "Bing, bing, 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 there it is." Now, I'm sorry, I catch on pretty quick. I would never be able to tell you which buttons he pushed. And it was insane how fast he did it, and had this, I can't believe you don't know how this works kind of attitude. And she looks up at me, and I go, "Did you get that?" And she says, "Yeah, I got it." I said, "Okay, no problem." So we go through the order, and I get my drinks, and I leave. And, as I'm driving away, I'm starting to think of this, right? Because again, I start thinking in my business, am I training my employees at the opportune time, right? So think about it. If we go back to this prominent kind of coffee, food, donut chain, you sit and you say to yourself, does that employee really need to be can she maybe stand back and look? Or maybe shadow somebody while they're doing the job, but shadow them, and if there's a 1 cream coffee or something like that, just make that stuff. But does she need to be the person in front of the cash? Because cash really directs the volume and the longevity, like how long it takes customers to go through. Because if you take an extra 4 minutes trying to find stuff, that backs everything up, right? I'm sure you can agree with that. Is there a better time for them to bring that employee in for training? And I think the answer is yes. During the day when it's a little slower, when you can, as a trainer or as somebody that is there to facilitate the growth of this individual, where you can pay more attention to them. You could be more, present with them, as opposed to being in your own rush, in the juice yourself, right? So when you have your staff, your employees, your team come out, because in the end, our teams are what make our companies great, right? Your team, if you're in sales, you make the sale. Your team facilitates everything else. So your team is the most important part of the business. I often say, sales is the gas, but without oil, the engine's not running. You can have as much gas as you want in there. The engine's not going to go very far. So when are you? Are you really training them? Are you helping them grow? Are you facilitating that growth at an opportune time? Or are you more kind of doing it when it's right for you? And when it's right for you is not always right for your customers. I've been at brokerage firms where they put people out too early. And yes, sometimes growth of a business, I've been there where my business was growing so much, we had to put green people in the business. And I sit back now and I start thinking about it and I say to myself, that was horrible for my customers. And I remember the ops manager at the time says to me, he goes, I hate doing this because they're not trained. And my whole thing was, I don't care. I need a body. I need a body there to do some work. So, put the person on medial tasks. But how much do people like medial tasks? As much as sometimes they are, mandatory to grow and to learn, right? But how much time are they going to put on medial tasks? Let them be trained where they need to be trained before bringing them in. Rally your team and say, listen, we got, a good 3 weeks before we have somebody trained. How can we rally together as a team to make this happen? Maybe bring them in for a couple hours a day in the afternoon when, in the lulls, right? Because there's ebbs and flows to everyone's business. So what I'm encouraging you to do this week is really take a look at that training structure. Take a look at the facilitation structure that you have in place. Take a look at when you utilize your team's time. But more importantly, take a look at your team and how the structure is with the end result, which is getting the client to their goals. And how does that affect the client getting to their goals? I've been a big believer in hiring people before you actually need them as you're climbing. A lot of people say, well, you got to get to that, where you're crazy and then you bring somebody on. And I think you spend the money before that. Because you bring a customer on and you want to facilitate the goals of that customer, right? All us salespeople out there, everyone looking at this that's a salesperson has the same idea. They're here to get business. And you get all the business in the world. If your team can't facilitate and manage that business at a pro level, you're kind of wasting your time. So as a professional salesperson, how much emphasis are you putting on your team's personal and professional growth? How much emphasis are you putting on when somebody comes into your business to help you continue to scale, right? Because that's what it is. It's assistance to help you to continue what you do the best, which is sell, and your ops team do the best, which is facilitate the operations of every customer. So what do we do? How do we do it? And when do we do it? These are the 3 questions I really want you to think about going into this holiday season. As we sit here now, we're, 4 weeks away from Christmas pretty much. Things are still ramping up. They're getting hot and heavy and they're going to start slowing down. Maybe that's the time. If you plan to have an explosion in the first Q1 of 2020, maybe now's the time to bring an ops person in and take the time, give them the time that they need to ask the questions without feeling the pressure of that day-to-day kind of push and stress. Do you know what I mean? Because in transportation, we got this day-to-day stress, this day-to-day frustration that comes. And when people come to talk to you in that frustration, trust me, you think your intuition's on point, most people's intuition's on point. So if you think you can walk in a room and feel the people in the room, don't ever forget that your team can do the same. So if they walk in the room and feel that, okay, now's not the time to ask Dan that question, they're not going to ask it. But maybe it's a question that's really going to help facilitate their growth. Right? So think about this as we head into the next couple of weeks here before the end of 2019. And really start asking yourself, when, what, and why? Like, when am I training my people to get the best out of them? Because I'll tell you, this girl was ready to quit. And she might be the best cashier ever in a month. We don't know. How many ops people have you had that have left? And probably because they weren't trained properly. How many salespeople have left companies to go to other companies because they train better? They help facilitate that growth of the individual. They help that individual become a better version of themselves. So if you're a company that doesn't train, think about it. And often people say, well, I'm worried about training people because I'm worried they leave. Well, what if you don't train them and they stay, right? You've heard that saying before, but it's true. Would you rather have 6 pros or 12 mediocres? Right? I'd rather have 6 pros. People that I know are going to pay attention to every facet of their business when it comes to scaling, because you can scale as big as you want. If the foundation's not strong enough to hold the new volume and hold everything together, you're done. So you spend all this time, energy, and effort building a relationship, developing, sharing with a customer how solid you are, only to let them down, right? So a lot of salespeople say, oh, I was so bad and my ops team messed it up. Well, it all starts at the top. So if your ops team messed it up, then look in the mirror because you're the one that messed it up because you didn't allow or train your ops team properly. There's so many people that argue that sales and ops kind of friction. There's no friction there if you involve your ops in everything. If you give them all the information, it actually becomes a mutual sale, right? Like you bring a new customer on, mutually you both feel like you were a big part of bringing that customer on. But that starts with training. And don't do it in the middle of the juice. Don't throw somebody into the fire and say, well, they're going to sink or swim, because that's not fair to them. And a lot of you out there that have been selling for many years, you're like, well, but it is. I got thrown into the fire. No, you didn't. You listened to people. You watched. And I ask you this question. If you still, after that, you go back and you think, you're like, no, Dan, yeah, that's BS. I did get thrown into the fire. Okay. How much quicker would you have got ahead? How much quicker would you have been, successful or achieved your greatness if you would have been trained properly? If you would have taken, 2-3 weeks. When I first started, I sat with the best of the best salespeople in the company I started with for a month and a half, 2 months. And I remember my supervisor going like, when are you going to start selling? Like, I'm almost ready. I'm getting that knowledge. But you know what? I broke out in that first year and I won sales competitions. I was the fastest growing salesperson. I did things that most salespeople didn't do. Salespeople that were there for 3-4 years, I was beating them in sales, right? Why? Because I trained, I listened, I learned, but I did it in a mindset and in a framework. And listen, trust me, at that time, I was 16, almost 17 years old. I had no clue what I was doing, but now I look back and I say, I was able to absorb everything. When the juice was going on, I would sit back at the back of this gentleman's office and I'd just watch. I'd watch the body language of how people move. I'd watch what they say. I watched how they stayed calm and when they got excited and when they got irritated and when they got annoyed. And I'd watch all these different levels, all these ebbs and flows in the business. And I realize now that that was critical to my growth as a salesperson. I remember when I first moved to Ontario from Quebec, I was a hothead. Things wouldn't go my way and I would blow a gasket. And the owner of the company at the time sat me down, and he was a lifesaver. And he sat me down and he said, listen, you're my vice president of sales. You can't act like that. But he didn't do it when I was in the juice. He didn't do it right away. He waited till things calmed down because he knew my mindset wouldn't be there, right? And for all of you out there that train people, that help people, that facilitate growth in a time of stress, of anxiety, of pressure, the brain is not ready to accept the knowledge, to accept the framework, to accept the training, to accept the growth as it should be. You got to get in that calm state where you can absorb it, think about it, realize it, process it, spit the stuff out that doesn't work and keep the stuff that does. All of you watching my stuff, I'm going to come out one week and say something you're really going to disagree with, but it just doesn't work for you. But somebody else could be 2 cubicles away from you who's watching the same video. They're going to be like, wow, that was the best. Like that just bing, lights went off. So it happens. I say a lot of the same things over and over and over again. I just say them in different ways. And one of those ways is going to connect with you. So for this week, really start paying attention to how you train, when you train, and why you train. Because why do we train our team? Why do we try and get better? It's to facilitate not only our growth, but the growth of our customers. Because facilitating our growth is one thing, but if we don't help our customers grow and our customers achieve the goals, we'll never have customers to help facilitate. So in sales, we help facilitate our customers' growth. Until next week, my friend, remember, go out there, make every call a learning experience, and crush your sales. Take care. We'll see you next week.